Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Equity Matters. We're very excited to have you here with us and to have our distinguished panelists join us for a very insightful conversation. I'm Shalini Sankaran. I am Director of Translational Programs at Duke Innovation Entrepreneurship. I'm very honored to be introducing our moderator today. The Duke Innovation and Entrepreneurship Initiative is an interdisciplinary initiative at Duke. We offer education, resources, connections, support to innovators and entrepreneurs across Duke and the community. We're delighted to be co-hosting this event with Fuqua School of Business and NC Central University School of Business. In 2017 to 2018, a survey by Small Business Trends showed that Black entrepreneurs contributed to the fastest growing segment of small businesses across the country. However, disparities in access to capital remains the most important factor that limits the establishment, expansion, and growth of minority-owned businesses. In order to achieve equity in Black business development and opportunity, intentional collaboration must exist, such that planning, assessment, investment, and practice support systemic change. We at Duke INE, the Fuqua School of Business, and our partners at North Carolina Central are fully committed to these efforts and to provide a platform from which access and opportunities are available to everyone. In the spirit of real, intensive conversation surrounding for what makes for equitable processes, programs, and overall investment and engagement, our two-day symposium will explore the current investment landscape, which disadvantages Black and underrepresented founders. And we'll provide investors with strategies to invest more equitably and discover new opportunities to support Black-owned businesses. Before moving on to today's panel and to introducing our moderator, I just have a couple of housekeeping items. We will not be using the raise hand feature, even though you see it at the bottom of your screen. We prefer that you type your questions in the Q&A feature, and panelists will either respond in real time or we will address questions at the end. We'll be sharing a link for feedback at the end of this event. We greatly appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to fill out that survey. And last but not least, if you're an investor, we hope you'll consider participating in Pitch, a competition for Black student founders. This event will take place on April 8th and 9th. Applications to Pitch are now closed, but again, if you're an investor or would like to participate, you can register at pitch.fuqua.duke.edu. Again, that's pitch.fuqua.duke.edu. And now, without further ado, please allow me to introduce our distinguished moderator for today's session, Mr. Randolph F. Wiggins. Randy serves as venture partner at Atento Capital, and he's the managing director of Build at Tulsa, the national and multi-sector effort to rebuild and revive Black Wall Street by attracting Black high-growth tech entrepreneurs and venture capitalists from across America and providing their companies and funds with the financial backing, relationships, partnerships, and entrepreneurial supports required for breakout success. Before joining Build in Tulsa, Randy served as executive co-lead of Princeton Alumni Angels in Silicon Valley, Princeton's Silicon Valley angel investing community. And he was manager on the tech and society team at Omidyar Network, the founder of eBay's Impact Investing and Venture Capital Fund. Randy co-led the team's efforts to prevent, mitigate, and correct the societal downsides of technology and maximize impact through investments in and strategic partnerships with ventures positively impacting Silicon Valley and its associated companies, teams, and products. Randy has spent time in Shanghai and Beijing with leadership from KKR China. He has consulted on the promise and impact of artificial intelligence on labor, economics, education, and society in China. Randy has built a distinguished career in policy. He has worked under the Lawrence S. Summers in the United States National Economic Council in the Obama White House, to help rebuild the American economy post the Great Recession. Randy holds a BA from Princeton University, majoring in public policy, and a JD from the UCLA School of Law. He's a proud inaugural member of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Millennium Scholarship Program, a $1.6 billion effort funded by Bill and Melinda Gates to promote academic excellence, increase diverse representation in areas like computer science and engineering, and develop a deep bench of future leaders to help build a stronger society and protect the future of the US economy. So without further ado, I'm very honored to welcome Randy, and we'll turn the mic over to him. Thank you for being here.
Charlene, thanks so much. And thank this amazing group of panelists. I'm going to allow the panelists to introduce themselves because I can't do justice to their stories. We're going to start off with the superstars, the entrepreneurs. So Candace, we're going to kick off with you. Please feel free to unmute and introduce yourself to the group, and then we'll go over to Jamelle.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to say thank you to John and Duke University for having me on the panel today, as well as Resilient Ventures, our most recent investors, for connecting me with this amazing network. I'm Candace Mitchell-Harris. I am the co-founder and CEO of Myavana. We are a beauty technology company, and we are building the future of hair care. We use artificial intelligence to actually analyze your hair type and texture and instantly match you to the best products to use for your hair. And we're solving a very huge problem that most women of color have with knowing what's actually best for our unique hair types. We also work with brands, retailers, and salons to recommend products and services along your hair journey. And so just as Amazon revolutionized e-commerce, we are revolutionizing the hair industry. And so I'm excited to be here to share my story. My background is in computer science. I'm a graduate from Georgia Tech, and I'm from Atlanta, Georgia.
Candace, thanks so much. And don't forget about the guys. We need help too.
Very true.
Absolutely.
More to come on that.
Please so. Jamelle, we're going to turn it over to you. Please unmute, introduce everyone to yourself. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank you again for joining us, as Candace alluded to, Resilient Ventures, and really just all of our investors, Donald Thompson, Dave Tomic, Dan Hunt, and the whole gang. But we are Gryppers. I'm the CEO and founder. We are a smart wearable textile technology company. And the very essence of our existence is that we want to strengthen your innate assets. So we strive to limit repetitive stress injuries and to rethink performance through practical applications that promote self-sufficiency. We found that there's this mutualistic bond between protection and performance. And so we've cultivated that through using different types of techniques that helps increase control and increase support to be able to give you an outcome and that you desire, as well as improve your confidence while you're playing so that you get the desired outcome that you're looking for.
Jamelle, thanks so much. Excited to learn more about your company. Next, we have Connie Evans, CEO of the Association of Enterprise Opportunity. Connie, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be a part of this amazing panel, so I'm really looking forward to sharing and learning both. As mentioned, I am the president and CEO of the Association for Enterprise Opportunity, AEO. We're the National Trade Association for U.S. Microfinance, with over 1,700 members across the country who provide capital and business support services to entrepreneurs, seasoned as well as beginning entrepreneurs and business owners. We use a combination of research, policy, and innovation, along with corporate partnerships, to really transform our economy into a robust market that is fair and inclusive for entrepreneurs of all color. I look forward to speaking with you.
Thank you so much, Connie. And closing out, we have Professor William Darity, a professor at Duke University. Professor.
Hi, I'm William Darity, better known as Sandy. I am the Samuel Du Bois Cook Professor of Public Policy, African and African American Studies, Economics and Business at Duke. And I head the Samuel Du Bois Cook Center on Social Equity. Much of the work that I do is on issues concerning racial inequality, particularly inequality with respect to wealth, which has strong connections to disparities in business ownership. And I'm pleased to say that our research center collaborated with Connie Evans's AEO operation on a report that was done maybe about 2 years ago on Black business development in the United States. So I'm very pleased to be on the panel with all three of these individuals, but Connie in particular, I'd like to give you a shout out.
Awesome. And I'd love to give you all a shout out. Thank you so much for the important work that you're doing. And we're going to jump into questions now. And as I stated at the beginning, we're going to start with the superstars, the people that are leading the way here. It's the younger folks. So we'll start with you, Candace. You were a standout student at Georgia Tech. And after a year of graduating, joined Flashpoint Accelerator, where you received your first seed investment. What was special about being in Atlanta, about Flashpoint and that first check? What were your biggest challenges and victories? And what lessons can we all take away from your experience as entrepreneurs, as angel investors, and also early stage investors?
Yeah, sure. I could actually spend the whole hour answering that question, to be honest, but I will share some quick highlights, and I'm sure a lot of points will connect throughout the panel today. So I was very blessed to actually enter a startup accelerator called Flashpoint a year after I graduated. And so what was special during this time is it was the beginning of this whole tech startup world just kind of bursting, right? A lot of tech companies were traditionally only in Silicon Valley, and the New York market was also developing at the time. So in Atlanta was really coming into its own as a startup hub, a tech startup hub, and what the term is now coined, the tech hub of the Southeast. And so of course that has now spread to the whole Southeast region, including this whole entire network present here. But at that time, it was actually in 2012. So I've been in business for over 8 years now. And that was really at the beginning of the cusp of really what I would refer to as a new wave, especially for Black entrepreneurs. And so at the time, we were actually the only Black team in a tech startup accelerator program, period. There were very few at the time. Y Combinator, I believe Techstars had started, and 500 Startups were the prominent ones. And so Flashpoint was really the beginning of what has now been a whole, wave in the Southeast. Another amazing thing was our check came from an angel investor who is known as the godfather of angel investing. His name is Sig Mosley. And through that, again, to tell you my background and where I'm coming from, I'm a first-time entrepreneur, and I have literally been building my business, learning as I go. And so to have someone actually invest in it, to say, hey, work on your idea, bring it to life, that is a pretty different experience, especially for Black entrepreneurs, right? So I come from a family, very, very strained financially. I never even knew it was possible to even do everything that I've accomplished. And so at the time, it was pretty much opening a door to new resources to build and grow. I think that one of the disadvantages that we tend to face is that we rarely get money to go figure it out, right? We're used to having to prove ourselves. We have to have the whole, 20-page business plan, all the receipts, everything. And even if we do prove it out, we still are doubted, right? But at this time, I was literally at the idea stage. And especially when you're building a tech company, it's all about innovation, right? And so we're literally building something that has never been done before. And so to have that, the capital to really start from customer discovery and build an MVP, which is like that first version of your product, to have users test, see if you can go get customers and really prove out what your business model really is, that was very rare at the time. And this was the first time I ever even understood what an angel investor was, but not knowing that we were at the beginning of this whole big wave. And so what it allowed us to do, actually, I will say in the first 18 months of starting from idea in an accelerator program to actually getting a product out to market, you know, of course, my company required a lot of research and development. So I studied the science of hair. What type of product could we build? I created the product before even knowing what Ancestry.com was, before even knowing 23andMe. I was not aware of these worlds, but realizing that we were doing this for hair. And of course, AI technology and machine learning has developed over time. So I didn't even have the automated process yet. We started strictly by sending hair strands to a lab, and I was blessed to get lab space at Georgia Tech. And so within that 18th month period, getting a product to market, I was able to raise close to about $300,000 in that time period. And so that was possible through angel investors. I did a friends and family round, a crowdfunding campaign, and I won a ton of pitch competitions. And so I know we're going to talk about a lot of these things, but my mindset at the time, because I actually did take the venture capital route as well, going to raise money, right? Going to the West Coast, meeting with all these VCs, and no one understood our market. No one understood natural hair. No one understood the hair industry. They were looking at me like I was crazy. And so I had to raise money by any means necessary. And so that's why I learned alternative routes of raising capital. So I was introduced to crowdfunding. I was introduced to friends and family rounds. And again, learning all this stuff as I go, learning term sheets as I go and doing it. And so that was pretty much my path in the beginning. And the other part of what was special about it is I built a lot of resilience during that time, because all of the no's that I got, I still had to figure out a way to make this happen. And I felt like I developed the grit and the perseverance that it really takes to endure the entrepreneurial journey. So it may have been hard, but I am thankful for how it built my character and built my tenacity. And so again, I can share a lot more about this whole journey, but I think those are the things that allowed me to really get in the game. I think a lot of entrepreneurs just need to get those early supporters to get you in the game, prove it out, build your product so that you can get to your next phase. And that's, I believe, the value of angel investors comes in, because you guys get to support us from the very beginning. So I do have 3 angels that came in during that time who are now benefiting tremendously from the upside of my company's growth. So there is a lot of value of getting in there in the early days and supporting founders in our vision. So that's a bit about how my journey started and really how I was able to reach the first milestone, which is get your product to market. And then, you know, other milestones come after that. But that was kind of like the major first thing for my business.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Candace. I think a theme that we're all going to hear throughout the afternoon is grit and perseverance. And I firmly believe that is inherent in Black entrepreneurs, just because of what the African-American community has had to deal with throughout history in the United States. So that is a superpower of Black entrepreneurs: grit, perseverance, making something out of nothing, being able to build something from a vision. And I think that's something that many entrepreneurs, some who are way more, advanced, may lack. So I think there's really a superpower here amongst this community. And Candace, thank you so much for sharing that. Now we're going to jump over to Jamelle. Jamelle, your company Gryppers is working at the intersection of technology and sports in a really crowded field. How are you working to enter and grow in such a competitive market? And what roles have angels and other early stage investors played in your success and growth?
Yeah, so I'll break this into 2 parts, just so that I'm making sure I answer them, because I tend to go on tangents. But in the beginning, so for us, it's always been about how much of our resources we can tap into and utilize. And that's really what kind of propelled us, is to be able to utilize the different resources around us and to really get as much out of it as we could, because we knew we didn't have a lot of different opportunities to do it after this. And we weren't going to be able to just continue to go to the next step because we just didn't have that type of access. So between that and then working our network, my co-founders, Precious Wilson Pulley and DeWan Morgan, they have an extensive network. And so where we wouldn't have, or other companies wouldn't necessarily have the same access, we did. And so we were able to take those relationships, take our network, take the resources that were available to us, and then really, really make the most out of it. And those are, you know, in the beginning, those were those immediate relationships, but now those are turning into something long-term that we can use and help us grow as we continue to build the organization. Now to the second part of the question, you know, pertaining to our angels and early stage investors, we had 2 investors come on really early. At least for us, it's early. That's not typical of what other people have to experience, but for us, it was early enough. And that was Dave Tomic and Donald Thompson. And they really, really helped us move this business, because had they not invested at the time that they did and really validated us. And to give you a little perspective, Dave Tomic is a Caucasian male who exited a company. He was a CFO of a company. They exited at, I think, $3 or $4 billion at the time when they exited. And his investment in us was the validation that we would see come to fruition as we continue to grow and look for other investment. Donald Thompson has an extensive network. He's an African-American male who's also validated us from that perspective in terms of the industry, because he works in sports and athletics as well as tech. And so those 2 really were key, not only key investments, but key people. They sit on our board, and rightfully so, but their network has led to nearly 75% of the capital that we've raised. And that's really unheard of, right? You have to go here and there and everywhere. And our experience is different. It's been hard for us to raise money, but it's the money that we have raised has come from that network. Resilient Ventures has invested in us as well, with Tom Droege and Keith Daniel. And they are the next phase of that for us. They're the new Donald Thompson and Dave Tomic for us, as they're pioneering our ability to move forward now that we're at a stage where, you know, we have product that's on the market and in the market, and we're able to really propel the business at a different level, because we have people that are already in our business that are working for us while we're working to grow the business to help us get the capital we need so we can be successful long-term. And that's atypical of, you know, minority companies, right? You don't really have a lot of runway. As Candace was alluding to, you kind of got to get it right. You don't get an opportunity. You don't get the luxury of being able to figure it out as you go. And when you do try and figure it out as you go, you're looked down upon. And, you know, that's really weird. One thing I didn't mention was that innovation is access. And we've known that from the beginning. And what we're doing is not what everybody else is doing. So we come and understand that's our role, that's our niche. We bring different markets together. But we also have a great group of people around us between our resources and our network. And that's really what's been able to help us move the business forward.
Jamelle, thanks so much. For the entrepreneurs in the room, the virtual room, if you can just give 1 or 2 minutes, how did you meet those 2 investors, Dave and Donald?
So I was, again, fortunate. God's been blessing me along my life, right? And Dave, I actually met and had a relationship with him years beforehand. And so as I was, as we were getting to a point to where the project and what we were doing was becoming investable, but more so it was becoming something real. You know, I'm a visionary, I have grandiose visions, and it was becoming something that was really tangible. Bringing Dave in, who was a friend, I consider a close friend, really helped us, because without that relationship existing beforehand, and again, his validation, because one thing I didn't say and I need to say, because it's really important, is that a lot of minority companies have to get co-signed for or validated, vouched for, whereas the other companies who go to see VCs, they just have to get referred. And so you have to prove so much more being a minority company. And Dave, being a white male, was able to give us that he was able to vouch for us. And I met him, again, through my network at NC State. And then Donald Thompson, we actually were in a cohort with a company he had invested in before. They saw us and what we were doing, and they ended up referring us to Donald, who, as soon as he saw it, he's like, I'm in. If Dave is in, I'm in. And so that's kind of how the business came about, or the investments came about.
Thank you, Jamelle. I think allyship is critical here. So thank you for highlighting that really important point. So now we're going to jump from the entrepreneurs to the pillars, the people who build foundations on which we're all currently building. Connie, we're going to start with you. You started in mental health with a focus on disadvantaged women and families before building quite the career in international economic development, finance, and business. This question is about pattern matching, an approach used by investors to evaluate founders based on what has worked before, an approach that rewards founders who share racial, ethnic, educational, and professional backgrounds and perpetuates bias. From your experience, you've seen many successful Black entrepreneurs. From a personality, mindset, and sheer psychological perspective, what is the investment community missing when it comes to understanding how truly capable Black entrepreneurs are and how poised they are to create game-changing companies?
It's a really great question. You know, when I think about pattern matching, that approach, of course, has led to very successful investments. Unfortunately, it's just built on stereotypes. You also mentioned, Randy, mindset. So let's start there. You know, studies in social psychology has pointed to the impact of instructors with a fixed mindset versus instructors with growth mindsets. You see significant achievement gaps in students by those who have instructors with fixed mindsets. They are fixed in their view of the patterns that they're looking for and who has intelligence, who has potential, who has capabilities. I believe those are the same parallels in the financing and investing community. Candace and Jamelle are excellent examples of what would be missed if they had not received their initial capital and their investors sticking, you know, to some pattern matching that doesn't recognize the genius and the innovation and capacity that they bring. We also have found that, you know, people use, or at least they say they're using the pattern matching approach for efficiency, right? They get so many requests. It's an efficient way to weed through that. But we know that that's really not it. They are using it because I think in part of their social reputation and their network. We cannot forget the role that social capital plays in our lives, and investors psychologically are rewarded in social capital by following the patterns of their network. I think Janelle spoke really well to that about where his investors came from. It was a social network. That network followed what they knew and a pattern of their influencers and their peers. And so despite their stated goal of making high returns, those who are, I think they really set aside the goal that they have, you know, articulated for growth and returns. They set that aside, you know, in exchange for investing in what looks familiar to them, and which limits what they can actually do. I think trust is another dimension critical in social interactions. Unconscious racial bias affects who we trust. Investors are trusting in what and who they have seen before. And in the absence of any prior experience, how are trust decisions to be made? We heard, for example, Candace talk about when she went to folks, they didn't know anything about hair. They didn't know anything about Black hair. That, you know, it's like, you're foreign to us. I cannot trust you because you are so foreign to me. So from the less certain evidence that's available, one must make decisions based on a very subjective estimate of the founder's reputation, given what we can observe about them in the moment or have learned about them from other sources, meaning like their group, their peer group, their social reputation, their group memberships, things like that. AEO's research that Sandy actually mentioned, we did research on the tapestry of Black business ownership in America. And that research has shown that the trust gap combined with the wealth gap and the capital gap acts like kryptonite in keeping Black businesses from reaching their potential. And so when you ask, like, what are people missing? What are these investors missing? They are missing that potential. They are missing the upbeat, the upward rewards of what business owners, Black business owners are able to actually give. AEO here, we are currently conducting further research and a deep dive to better understand the trust barrier, how it manifests in the decision-making of not only investors, but the decision-making of Black entrepreneurs, and what tools and solutions can be brought to address change. Some psychologists have talked about the accumulated trauma Blacks have experienced from discrimination and implicit bias. I loved hearing Candace talk about how, you know, it was hard, but it made her resilient. What we have found in our research is that not all entrepreneurs and founders are finding their way to be like Candace over all of these years and stay in and see their businesses grow. That accumulation of trauma from being discriminated against, having implicit bias surround them, even under the pretense of, you know, we want to do good, we want to bring you in, we want to diversify, that still takes such a toll on some founders that they don't grow their companies. They give up, they quit trying to kind of make that breakthrough strategy. And so just think about, you know, the businesses that are awesome, like the two entrepreneurs and founders we have here. Think about how many more actually just don't continue because they get beat down. Now they're still in business, they're just not growing in the same way. And so that cost is costing us in jobs, it's costing us in contributing to the broader economy. And I think, you know, again, when we began to see and understand, for investors to understand what this means, we can begin to figure out new strategies that can really help change what they do. Going back to your original question about how you started the question about pattern matching, you know, pattern matching could work and not be so bad if it was based on the real issues of the business and not all the psychological baggage and mindset and attitudinal bias and that comes with it. If you were only looking at the pattern of, you know, the business model, the distribution model, you know, those kinds of things that are relevant to making a successful business, then that pattern, creating a system around that pattern might allow more Black entrepreneurs and founders to actually get the capital they are seeking. And so I think we really do have to think about this issue of trust and social capital and the mindset that investors come. And when we don't open up our minds, you know, to recognize the bias that is inherent in how we move through the world. It's not even just about investing. It's the same. It's how we move through the world. The psychological, the emotional, all of those things that are part of our human interactions, whether we're talking about, you know, we're with Duke University right now, whether we're talking about education, whether we're talking about the investment field, it's the same, those same issues come into play. And that's what we need people to understand. I don't think the answer is, you know, let's send all investors to therapy so they can work it out. Although we might all need to do that, I don't think that's really the answer, but creating and changing systems so that we are kind of using process and standards and systems to bypass, if you will, those individual mindsets that really, I think, are at the real cause of why more investors are not following suit. I love the story that Jamelle talked about. Jamelle, sorry if I just messed up your name, talked about in terms of, you know, the social capital that he spoke to, right? The network. Somebody else saw his friend do it, and he goes, well, sure, I'll validate that. It must be a great idea if he's doing it. So I think as investors look at their own social networks, maybe they should think about, instead of buying, I think I heard this one, instead of buying the normal vanilla ice cream that you've come used to buying, look at all the other kinds of flavors of ice cream that are now in the marketplace, and make a decision to just do something different and choose to buy a different ice cream flavor rather than stick with your kind of bias focus on vanilla.
Connie, thanks so much. A couple points that I just want to touch on. We know that diversification is key in any investment portfolio. So encouraging these angel investors who have a very powerful position to diversify their investments. Start thinking differently, right? Actively think differently. Wake up and say, if I thought about this in the opposite way, what investments would I make? And then making race blind investments. So take color off the table. Just look at the companies that are the top, look at the business model, everything that you've noted, and take race out of it. And for those investors who do that, I believe it was Citigroup. They said, if we close gaps in funding, over the next 5 years, we'll add $5 trillion to the gross domestic product. $5 trillion. You know what that means? That means more billionaire founders. It also means more billionaire investors who invested in those founders. So there's a really, really deep opportunity that we have at this moment in time to really change things significantly and to have a huge return while we do it. So Connie, thank you so much. We're going to move on to Sandy. Sandy, your work is focused on the very controversial issue of reparations. Even with bills like HR 40, it's highly unlikely that 40 acres and a mule will ever become the reality. What role can technology entrepreneurship, arguably a faster wealth builder than compound interest, play in bringing racial and economic justice to the Black community? What role can governments, corporations, and investors play in making sure that this sector is an even more powerful force for change?
I think I'd like to try to address that by giving an overview of the landscape. And I'd like to start by providing some information about the magnitude of racial wealth differences in the United States before talking about the question of how we might close those differences. And the differences are quite staggering. The average Black household in the United States has $840,000 less in net worth than the average white household. Black Americans constitute about 13% of the nation's population, but only possess about 2.5% of the nation's wealth. And it's of course quite significant that an important component of that differential, although people frequently focus exclusively on home ownership, but an important component of that differential is the gap in business ownership and business success. So it's not just a question of whether or not people participate in entrepreneurship, it's a question of whether or not their enterprises are comparably sustainable and comparably profitable as those enterprises that are owned by white Americans. And we have to recognize that there's a tremendous amount of motivation in the Black community to engage in entrepreneurial activity. In fact, I think Black women actually form formal businesses at a higher rate than white women. And Black men's participation in entrepreneurial activity is extremely high as well, albeit distorted by the over-incarceration that they experienced. And if we were to make adjustments for Black male entrepreneurial participation that took into account the high rates of imprisonment, we would find that entrepreneurial activity is extremely high also. And so it's not a question of motivation, but it is a question of what the opportunity context is for success in the business world. I would note that I think it's really important to take into account prior parental and grandparental wealth as a basis for creating a springboard for success in the world of business ownership. Prior wealth provides a cushion. It provides a complement to access to venture capital. And we know that access to venture capital is highly distorted by race. I believe that Black women receive less than 0.2% of all available venture capital. And if you were to take Black men and women together, I think that it's less than 3% of all venture capital that goes to Black entrepreneurs. So if you have prior grandparental or parental wealth, you're in a position to have the resources to do, as Candace put it, figure it out. And you can figure it out without having to solicit additional resources to put you into a position to actually shape your business plan. So that said, then I think that one of the key issues that we have to address that is really outside of the orbit of building Black businesses in a direct way is the question of this difference in wealth between Black and white households at the outset. And so as a consequence, in the work that I've done, the focus has been on the question of the direct provision of additional assets to Black families in such a way that you build Black wealth so that Black entrepreneurs will have that additional resource base that would give them the trampoline that they would need to be more highly successful. So you asked specifically about a particular growth of technology-based enterprises, and that's an arena in which Black entrepreneurs are disproportionately excluded. And I certainly think that it's highly desirable to have increased access to that arena of business activity, but I don't think that will close the racial wealth gap in and of itself, because the Black entrepreneurs who enter into that arena will still be somewhat hamstrung or crippled by the fact that they don't have the prior wealth that's transmitted across generations. And one final point I'd like to make at the outset is that we frequently have mistaken beliefs about the sources of these wealth differentials. Folks frequently make arguments that they're attributable to some sort of deficient behavior on the part of Black folks. And so you get solutions that are mistaken as well, like the claim that if we just gave Black people more financial literacy, we would close the racial wealth gap. And what this ignores is the whole history of national policies that have crafted this gulf in wealth. And the one that I'd like to highlight in concluding is the Homestead Act that was introduced in 1862, where approximately 1.5 million white families received 160-acre land grants from the federal government, which was their foundation for wealth, and it carries over to current generations. It's now estimated that 45 million living white descendants of recipients of those Homestead Act grants are beneficiaries in terms of their current economic position. The Homestead Act allocations, which were racially biased, were conducted at the same time that Black Americans emerging from slavery were denied the 40-acre land grants that they were promised as restitution for their years of bondage.
Sandy, thank you so much for those insights. I mean, what you're talking about right now is kind of my life, working, in Tulsa to rebuild Black Wall Street. At the turn of the 20th century, the center, the epicenter of Black business and entrepreneurship in America that was ultimately destroyed. And I often say when we talk about issues of reparations or racial and economic justice, people come at that from a deficiency mindset and believing that, African Americans never had a chance to achieve these things. And the reality is we did achieve those things. And when they
were taken away from us.
Exactly. Many times by the federal government itself. Yeah. So I'm very excited. I don't want to get into politics. This new administration, they seem very supportive. Let's see what happens. I think we're in a good moment in time. So we're going to jump to general questions for the entire group now. And let's see, and I'll let people, I guess, raise their hand for the question they think they can answer best. So we'll start with this one. According to a February Reuters article, even with so many recent announcements around funds focused on Black entrepreneurs, it seems like there's a new fund coming out every week. That's a new $100 million fund, $50 million fund focused on Black entrepreneurs. There still is a struggle to find funding. Funding remains elusive. To what can we attribute this? In the wake of the murder of George Floyd, where you have so many corporate commitments to Black founders, so many funds, why is there still a struggle? for Black founders to achieve the financial support they need. Connie, I feel like we're on a game show. Unmute, Connie. You're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Perfect.
I'm going to go back to some of the things I just said. But I think there are three things that come to mind, and literally the first one is the lack of trust that I just spoke to. That I think is probably the biggest. We call it different. I think it gets called all kinds of different names, but fundamentally it goes back to a lack of trust. The second thing, I think there's a lack of intentionality and goal measurement, right? I learned a long time ago, what's important gets measured. And the intentionality of setting goals for diversifying investment portfolios is necessary. Tying that to compensation, all of that, however you want to think about setting the goals and measuring it, I think that's why. It's platitudes without that. It's people say, oh yeah, we want to increase, we want to do this for our racial equity programs that are taking place right now. So I think that's an important piece, that intentionality is not really there, and it's not being really measured up against any kind of set goals. And then the third one, I would say, really is a lack of attention to the psychological kind of cues and determinants of behavior that go unnoticed, that goes, unconsidered in any of these investment practices. I mean, Randy, you're an investor, right? Do you sit around and with your investor buddies and think about the psychological issues that you may, that may be going on in your head, in your life, as you make these decisions? Probably not, right? It's not something that we bring to the forefront in terms of helping people change their behavior and really pay attention to what's going on in their head when they're making those decisions. A lot of people, aren't aware, of course, of their implicit bias. That's why it's kind of called implicit bias. They say that's not their intention. But I think those three things combined, the lack of trust, the lack of intentionality, goal setting and measurement, holding people accountable to goals and measurement, and then the lack of awareness, if you will, of your internal thinking, what has brought you from a mindset and psychological point of view, what's guiding your decisions, whether they are conscious or unconscious, what's really going on to guide those decisions. So I would say those three things really are what's keeping funding kind of elusive for Black founders.
Thank you, Connie. And you're right. I don't think about my own psychological well-being or standing. Sometimes I think about those around me when I'm in these meetings, but not myself. So we're going to move on. So much of the story around the struggles of Black entrepreneurs focuses on the lack of financial capital, but much less is mentioned. And this has been brought up already, and I'm so glad to hear it. So less is mentioned about social capital. We talked about the role that social capital can play in the success of Black entrepreneurs. Jamelle, your story is a perfect example of that. But how can we build more of it? Jamelle, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really fine question. How can we build more of it? I think it really does start with, as Connie alluded to, trust, right? We have to build, we have to extend our trust beyond where we're comfortable. And in many situations that doesn't happen. And that goes from, whether you're, for lack of a better term, growing up in the hood, which is next door to, which is right next to downtown. And you got somebody on the outskirts in the upper town, and they have to be able to extend beyond that border. I mean, it's right up the street. It's a 2 or 3 minute drive. And how do we extend our trust and our belief with people who are basically in our community, our social circle, not just keeping to our community? And by saying that, you mean your neighborhood. It's how do we go beyond just that neighborhood, but the connecting neighborhoods, because there are people who we interact with or pass by on a daily basis who we can help and assist outside of just investment. And now if you take that mindset and turn it into investment, you start to open up where you're looking for these different companies from and the different type of people that you're looking to invest in. And you start investing in ideas and businesses and not necessarily the color of the people who are behind those ideas and those businesses.
Yes, I'd love to add to that, because I actually feel that our social capital is a huge strength for the Black community that's underutilized. And so I think one of the big things it requires is strategy. So if we got, even let's take all of us on this panel, right? If we sat at a table together and listed out all of our networks, who we know, who we have access to, and actually strategize about how to make things happen, I think we would see a lot of big things in regards to access to capital, but also access to resources. So I think that a lot of us are operating in silos, and we're not working together with who we know, and the influence that we have based on who we know. So I think that it requires more strategy, and also letting go of egos. So to your point, there is a new fund like launching every week, right? Which is awesome. I think that it's unprecedented the amount of money we now have access to in different means. But I also feel that, you know, everyone kind of wants to be known for what they're doing, and it's kind of it's self-fulfilling, right? It's about you versus who you're helping. And I think that if more of us, you know, again, going back to strategy, I think that we could open a lot more doors in terms of our relationships and social capital, if we were all working together versus everyone kind of building on their own. So I think that's like a huge improvement that we could have that could open up even more doors and just make us more powerful as a unit, as a community.
Randy, if I could go behind Candace, AEO just completed one project. We still have our big trust study going on, but we concluded one smaller project where we've been working with cohorts of business owners in 6 cities. And part of what we were looking to discover is what are the organizations doing to help build trust and help get rid of this trust barrier that Black business owners told us they experience. Only one group really out of the 6 so far has done anything that when, again, in the focus group, the business owners told us it had not changed their view of the trust barrier. What that one group did, and happened to be here in Chicago, was they literally brought, I mean, it's strategy, but it's not, you know, brain science, right? They literally brought investors and financial institutions to meet with these business owners on a regular basis while in that program. They got to build up that social capital, and business owners actually were able to get capital at the end of that process because the bankers and the investors felt now comfortable. They were using their social capital over a period of, you know, 7-8 months to actually get to know. So folks weren't not strangers. They couldn't say, oh, I'm only making this decision because of something about your background. They made the decision because they got past that and were able to really look clearly at all of those businesses. In this case, they were in the food industry. But I think that's one example. All the other work that went across the other 5 cities, it did not seem to change the founders' sense of that trust barrier being ameliorated, right? It was still there. And so I just use that as one example as, you know, what might it take to actually help build that social capital, and one of the strategies that we've seen on the ground to work.
Got it. Connie, Candace, Jamelle, thank you so much for that answer. Super thorough. I'm going to jump around. I have several questions here, but I want to jump around a little bit. I'll say this one. Let's kind of highlight some folks here. So I don't know how many of the folks in the audience or on the panel have watched the Facebook movie, The Social Network, but I found it amazingly educational. And most people are like, you're nuts, but I love understanding what's going on behind the scenes here. So you had one of the co-founders of Facebook, Eduardo Saverin, seeking funding by selling ads to small stores in New York, while Mark Zuckerberg met Sean Parker, right? Who introduced him to Peter Thiel, who not only wrote Mark his first check, but introduced him to Accel Partners, who wrote Mark a check ultimately for $13 million. Peter Thiel not only helped him to get that cash, but helped him structure his company so that he would remain CEO for life, maintaining maximum control of the company and becoming one of the wealthiest people on earth. Who are the Sean Parkers and Peter Thiels for the African-American community?
A very great example. We can break that down several ways, and I'll share some people that I do feel fit those categories. And we know that, again, the legal side of this is also very important, very, very, very important. So one of our Peter Thiel was Mike Ross, an angel investor based out of Atlanta, Georgia. Not necessarily on the business side, but in terms of the capital to continue to grow, but also in your example, you mentioned what I'm going to refer to as a domino effect or a chain reaction, right? So one person puts in the check, but it leads into the next check and the next check and the next relationship. And so for us, you know, each check led to the next one through relationships, through introductions, connections, through referrals, recommendations. And so I am going to coin Mike Ross as that, because it was not only for my business, but for several businesses. One of the businesses was Park Pick, which is founded by Joel Burks, that was sold to Amazon. And so now you have the next, you know, Black tech millionaires now investing in the next thing. And they started Collab Capital, and they are now investing in Black entrepreneurs. And so it's a domino effect that I think right now is providing more access to capital. But we do need those players who are also helping us structure our businesses in a very smart way. And so I ran into those challenges, you know, unknowingly, because again, learning as I go, not familiar. So I actually did start off with co-founders that are no longer with the business. And so I had to go through that process from a legal standpoint to buy out those co-founders. How do I structure equity so that I can, you know, maintain my ownership and control as the company grows? But what do you do when those instances happen? And so there are, I think attorneys play a big role in our business building as well, and being smart on the legal side. Because again, as you go through these rounds of funding and you have to, again, gather the paperwork, populate that data room, you need all those documents in place. And so I have been helped a lot in that way to keep things clean and tight, because that's what actually allows you to raise the next round. You have to have all of that in place. And so I just want to give a shout out to Mike Ross. He's funded several companies that kind of allowed us to build. So he's one example that I can certainly share.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Candace. And to some people, that's a surprising question and a hard question to answer, because many operate quietly, or they may not necessarily exist in the numbers that they should. So I want to encourage everyone that's on the chat, if you have names that you know of, please share them, because this is about information sharing, right? And Candace definitely hit the nail on the head when she talked about collaboration. And Connie, you talked about allyship. So I think allyship, you know, between African Americans and, you know, majority people in this country, investors, what have you, is critical. And Candace, you talked about, you know, making sure that we're more collaborative within our own community, and we're not always trying to build shrines into ourselves. So both of those things I think are critical for making progress and moving forward here. Jump to our next question here. With Black users fueling the lightning fast growth of companies like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, most recently Clubhouse, a voice-based social media platform, but not sharing in any of the financial benefit of these platforms. How should Black users and founders be thinking about their influence and power and potential? And more importantly, how can these powerful users leverage their own influence for the success of Black founders and communities? Candace, I see you nodding. You want to jump on those?
Yes. I'm very, very, very passionate about everything that is now happening because we do have the power and we have to recognize that. And what that means is we have to build our own and we have to invest in our own. And that's what it comes down to. So there's another app called Fanbase app. I want everyone to download it. It is basically like Clubhouse, but it's built by a Black man, Isaac Hayes III, based in Atlanta. And so that's an example of how, just how everyone flocks to Clubhouse, but we have no ownership in that. Right. Let's flock to something that we can have ownership in, and let's support a Black founder. He actually did an equity crowdfunding raise on Start Engine. So some people were actually able to buy into that. And that is the strategy. And we have to be serious about it. I think that a lot of influencers, especially celebrity influencers, need to leverage their power as well. So we brought on celebrity brand ambassadors for our company. And that is going to be a strategy for me because that impacts my target audience. So every other influencer that's relevant to a particular market needs to get behind the tech founders that are innovating in that market. We have to work together. And so all the Black celebrities that have power and leverage and influence should get behind the Black tech founders that are building. And so I think that that is something that we see very easily happening for other platforms, Clubhouse, there are several. So we should be doing that for ourselves. And I could go on and on about that, but I want us to put action behind what we're talking about because a lot of these conversations are happening in a lot of places. I think that if we can just put the action behind it, we'll start to really see a change.
I would just add, I think this is a real opportunity also for innovation in terms of coming up with some new models and new structures. My dear sister friend, Jessica Norwood, is one who's kind of brought a lot of thinking around innovating for capital access that's built by folks in your own neighborhood, looking at how do the users or the folks who are buying your products or want to invest in your product and your business, how do you make that comfortable for local folks who, although Candace talked about the stars and the folks who got a lot of wealth and, the celebrities, et cetera, folks in your own neighborhood have money. They are working, they have money that they would probably like to invest, but they don't know how. And so I think there are all kinds of ways to think about, using that. And Jessica, who started Runway, I think is, again, kind of bringing some innovation around that. But I think there's a huge opportunity here for innovation of new models of how do you build investment from your own folks, right? How do you create a new vehicle where people can do something? In her case, it started off with, what are people comfortable with? People are comfortable with, they know, regular folks, they know CDs, right? They know what a CD investment is at a bank. Well, could you start something from getting, everybody in your network to invest $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000 into what they would call a CD, but that CD is actually linked to a fund for investing in startups, for example. So I think, again, it's a huge opportunity for innovation.
Awesome. Connie, I think you're tapping into something that I think is increasingly becoming, more common, with the use of the investing apps. I think we're totally headed in that direction. And the more we can get everyday Americans of all colors engaging in this work, the more value we'll unleash in the market. So really excited to hear that. We'll jump to this question. All of you are working to support Black innovation and entrepreneurship. in your minds, what will it truly take to create a Black Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, or Steve Jobs? And I'm going to ask that question to everyone because that's an important question.
I'm not sure that that should be our primary objective.
That's fair.
I'm not sure that the premise behind Black business development or Black wealth development should be the creation of a handful of Black billionaires, as opposed to a widespread improvement in the economic condition of the entire Black population. And so I'm not at all certain that that's the type of equality that I have in mind. I'd rather see a situation in which every Black household had a level of wealth that's comparable to the average level of wealth that's held by all white households, rather than a situation in which we replicate the extreme degree of inequality that exists among white Americans themselves. And so if we are going to try to create an environment in which there is an equitable opportunity for Black Americans to participate in entrepreneurial activity, I'm certain that there will be some folks who evolve or emerge who are going to be extraordinarily wealthy. But I don't think that the goal should be to produce a Black Jeff Bezos.
Understood. I guess that question kind of arose from a thinking that in an environment where that is even a possibility, you have a level of equity and equality that does not currently exist in the marketplace for African Americans. And of course, if you have a Black Jeff Bezos, you'll have people who fall down the lines creating, $1 million companies that are creating jobs, et cetera. So I totally understand your point there, and that's great feedback. Did anyone else have a thought around this, or should we just dump that question totally because of what Sandy said? Thank you, Sandy, for murdering my question. I appreciate it.
I support Sandy on this one. I'm not sure that should be the goal. I think the only thing I would add is that we need to create an environment where the resources are available for anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur, that they can try it. And through the words that I think either you or Candace used before, between, from grit and perseverance and innovation and ingenuity that they bring themselves, creating the environment for people to just flourish, for entrepreneurs to flourish, it should be the goal. And people will rise. Those who want to go there will rise if we can make sure that the resources and the systems supporting those resources are equitable.
Yeah, I think we want to have more Candaces and Jamelles.
Yeah, for sure.
Agreed.
For sure.
Agreed. So
there we go. Let's do it. And then we'll give back to the community and we'll keep on doing it. That's the strategy. So I'm all for it.
There you go. So we're definitely in a unique moment in history in the tech and venture space and in America generally. Moments, however, don't last forever. What should we be doing as entrepreneurs, angel investors, other funders, and everyone in the ecosystem? What should we be doing, thinking about today to ensure that this is more than a moment, but a foundation for a more prosperous and long-term future for Black founders and communities?
I'll start that off just because it's something that we're doing now at AEO. Earlier last year now, because of all of a sudden, so many people, have come to us to help them in their racial equity program. I think it's what most people are calling theirs, right? And so we have some of the largest corporations, you name them, Google, Universal, Comcast, NBC, Pfizer, just Facebook, a lot of them have come to us to manage their grant programs to Black-owned businesses. And so because I am one of those folks who pretty skeptical that this is gonna last. And so my viewpoint of it is take the opportunity to try to get the systems changed. We can get the money out, right? That's not a big deal. but getting those companies who are saying, oh, we need help in terms of, strategy and advice around our racial equity efforts these days, trying to get them now to go deeper than just, writing checks for grants, is to actually change the system, change the practices of what you're doing. So for example, we're in one corporation now where we are looking at across tech companies, for example, and looking to change their spend allocations, not just talking about what comes through your procurement department and how we can get more Black and brown people through that. Because we know those big tech companies are spending all kinds of places, and it's not just out of the supplier diversity program. So how do we look across their entire global enterprise and affect change in their spend allocation? So that's one. We're working with an online lender, a bunch of online lenders who've come to us to ask us to look at their criminal decline policies. We know there are some sharp folks who come out of prison who are starting businesses with all kinds of potential, but they can't get capital. So for a company to say, okay, AEO, come look at our decline policies and give us recommendations on how we need to change that so that we can start making better decisions about and open up capital access. So I think, again, take the money now while we can, but go and really try to make a change in the systems and the practices in these companies so that we actually have a better shot of some of these things being more sustainable and not this moment that we find ourselves in.
Connie's emphasis on mindset or psychology around the process of trying to support or enhance Black business development, I think is critical. One of our local entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs, Carl Webb, has said that frequently when companies take steps to try to support Black-owned businesses, they really view it as an act of charity rather than an act of investment. And we really need to have them shift their psychological point of view to truly value the types of support that they're giving to Black-owned businesses and treat them as acts of investment.
Yeah, it's just real quick point on that is, Connie, the policies within these larger organizations, they should change, and there's obviously a lot of room. So the ancillary budgets that many of these companies have, taking a percentage of that and dedicating that to finding a new business, a Black-owned business that's worthwhile, is going to be something that's important. Not just putting that money aside and donating it and saying it's a grant, but actually employing somebody to go out and source this investment from Black-owned business, because there are opportunities that are out there. And if you don't put the time and resources into it, you're just saying, Connie, here's the money, tell us where to give it. And that's not what's going to work. That not having a policy in place with people in place to do the work is not going to help move us forward and keep us on this trajectory.
Thank you, Jamelle. Candace, did you have any thoughts on it? It's pretty extensive answer here.
Yeah, the main thing I'll add is to hold these companies and organizations accountable. So everyone put out a racial equity plan last year. Where are they on it this year? What have they done? And those are the questions that we need to be asking, and we need to push back. So whether it's an organization that you're a part of as an employee or any connection that you may have, we need to hold them accountable. A lot of them do like to make these statements for PR purposes, and that makes them feel good. It makes them show that they are doing something, but at the end of the day, what have you really done? Those are the questions that we should be asking this year, and not be afraid to push back and to actually push for accountability, to Connie's point earlier.
Thank you, Candace. A friend of mine, Sherelle Dorsey, has a company called TP Insights, and she's tracking these commitments and what corporations are actually doing. So I encourage everyone to go follow Sherelle and learn more about her work for Black entrepreneurs. She's amazing. I want to open it up to questions, but before we do that, we're going to close out with one more question here. So a Harvard Business Review article powerfully noted that if less than 2% of venture investment goes to Black entrepreneurs, and there is no way that the investing community has come into contact with the Black Bill Gateses of the world, given the critical role that angel investors play in the first steps of the journey of entrepreneurs. And that's from financial capital, social capital, connections, everything we've been talking about today. What should the angel investors in this virtual room with us know? And tell, which not only what should they know, but what should they tell other angel investors in order to become true allies in the removal of structural and systemic barriers to economic success for Black entrepreneurs?
Well, I hate to, I hate to be the first one up here because I'm not sure if I actually have the answer for this one, but I'll take a shot at it. I don't know. I think tell the stories of Jamelle and Candace, right? People who invested in them are getting a return all the way. They're sharing in their upside and their growth. And if that's the reason that's what investors do. That's why they do what they do. And so share the examples. Talk about what you hear that's working. Talk about the genius and the success that Black founders are having and experiencing, and learn from them, right? Bring along your allies, your social network, create a new norm, right? If that what's make you have to be in a network that gives you your bennies, right? We run with people who we get some benefit from, and most of that is a social benefit, right? Reputational benefit. Create your own new group who will benefit from the kind of investing that you're doing by investing in Black-owned businesses. I think that's what I would tell folks. I'm not asking investors maybe to change what they do, maybe change who they do it with. And that change is hard to do or maintain alone. So bring your network, get them to meet folks like Candace and Jamelle, and that's one way of getting started.
One thing I'd say is, real quickly, is that sometimes you just have to take a pragmatic approach. If I'm a Silicon Valley investor, and I'm investing $2 million at a time for a company that's not going to yield a return until 10 years from now, they're not going to hit profitability until 8 years from now, but I'm putting $2 million into them today. Can I take a fraction of that and put it into a Black business that can yield a return in 5 years from now, with profitability 3 years from now, getting 25% of the capital that I would have allocated to that company and just moving that company forward? Sometimes it's just as simple as looking at the numbers and saying, hey, they can get the profitability faster with a whole lot less money. Sometimes we just need to take that risk, because it's all about risk management. And I think that's a pragmatic approach to it.
Totally agree. And we spoke about diversification earlier. And I think that we should be applying that in the diversity context in a new way, as opposed to just investing itself, investing in diverse founders there. So thank you, Jamelle. Candace, Sandy, did you have any insights around here, around this question?
Yeah, I would say keep doing what you're doing. This question was challenging for me because, racism isn't our problem, right? Like it shouldn't be our responsibility to dismantle these barriers. We didn't create them, but we're fighting against them. But I would say keep doing what you're doing, because every angel investor that's come into my business has been game changing and helped us get to the next level. Every fund that has come in at every stage helped us get to the next level. And so again, your $1 right now is going to be worth $10 soon, or $100. Like to Jamelle's point, like the the return on investment actually is very significant when you're building a profitable business. And again, if we can match that with being strategic, actually just, kind of thought a lot through this because NBVC is one of our investors too, which encourages, again, building revenue generating profitable businesses. But the reality that we're up against is, our peers are building companies that their valuation keeps increasing based on their fundraising strategy, how they price their rounds, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think the game-changing piece that's missing for us that could help us dismantle these barriers is being strategic with how you help the company grow and being in it for the long term, knowing that if you can just have a long-term mindset and at least commit to making an introduction along the way. Because of course, money helps on the operational side, but an introduction can help you get to the next partnership, the next contract. So introductions and actually thinking about your network and how you can connect your investment to your network also makes a big difference too. And it helps in the long run as we think about our exit strategies, right? So again, just thinking about it being in it for the long term, being strategic and keep doing what you're doing, it's definitely making a difference. And I think that we're very, very close to seeing another breakthrough in terms of how these systems are being dismantled.
Amazing, Candace, thank you so much. There are a couple of questions from the audience here, and I'd love to jump in for a minute or two before we give everyone the opportunity to close, share what you're working on, and a closing message to the audience today. One question here: what are the most effective ways to build a robust pipeline of Black tech and development talent? So Candace, this might be a question for you and really for the group as well, but I know that Atlanta is well known because it does have a robust pipeline of talent coming from places like Georgia Tech. Can you kind of share more about that experience, that ecosystem, and maybe what we can even do to build that ecosystem in other parts of the country?
Yes, for sure. So, of course, building relationships with the universities, definitely connecting, making sure that Black talent has the tools to succeed and grow in their careers. Another, I guess, probably lesser known fact are coding schools. So there are a lot of coding schools and tech skills training schools that are bubbling up, especially things like General Assembly, Lambda School. And actually it takes the untraditional path. So not necessarily the university path, but people who just want to learn the tech skills. And actually I'm literally onboarding a new developer today through the Lambda School. So the Lambda School is actually training tech talent and basically dispersing them to different companies. And so I think by aligning with the people who are actually training in these skills, they're actually helping with recruiting that talent as well. I have some UX designers from General Assembly. Of course, I get interns and developers from Georgia Tech. So again, like building those relationships where the talent is actually being educated and trained can help add to the pipeline too.
Did anyone else want to take a quick stab at that in their respective ecosystems? I know in North Carolina with the Triangle, there's a growing ecosystem of tech talent. A lot of it powered by Duke as well. So just wanted to see if anyone else had a piece to share there.
I think it's probably not an answer to your question, but it's a point that Sandy made actually, or helped us to make in our original tapestry study, which goes back to that issue of starting wealth. And to grow the pipeline, what we know is that there is a barrier to get into some of those schools, right? And so if your family or, whatever, you don't have the wealth to go to the right school to get that kind of training and technology skill-based set, you're still behind, right? And so I just want to raise that point that we still run into that as a barrier. And so that lack of starting wealth and where you get the resources to go to one of those schools to get the training is still a necessity as we look at how do you build that pipeline.
Totally.
Yeah, I think real quickly here, one of the things that North Carolina, Raleigh specifically, is doing is that they had HQ Raleigh, which was founded by a professor, actually a professor that I had in school, and also the E-Garage, and they're partnered with NC State, and now I believe they're partnering with the other bigger schools around the triangle. And what they're doing is they're allowing you to get the resources that you need, not having to have gone to college to be able to tap into it, whether it's lawyers that they're bringing in, IP attorneys that they're bringing in, just other entrepreneurs that are working in that environment to be able to tap into those resources and be around it. And everybody's not going to go to college, right? Everybody's not going to go to the same school, get the same type of education. But if you have access to something like that, whether you're in college, about to go to college, or if you already left, whatever the case may be, that allows you to be able to create a business and have a solid foundation and a support system, which we haven't talked enough about either, is having that support system, whether it's at your home or in your community. That support system and knowing where you can go to get answers is really big.
Awesome. Jamelle, thanks so much. I think what this just shows that there is a diverse ecosystem out there, talent that comes in all forms, all different ages, all different experience levels. And there's an immense opportunity for angel investors to find talent, to invest in talent, and to benefit greatly from a financial perspective. So it looks like we have 3 minutes. I want to give everyone a quick chance, just a closing message to the angel community, maybe something that you're working on right now, and how to best keep in touch.
Yes, so I would love your support if you would go to myavana.com and reach out if you're interested in helping us get to the next level. We have some big campaigns coming out this year where you can leverage your personal network to help us reach our customers. So customers are key for our businesses to succeed, right? That's why we're here. That's why we're building. And so I would love your support. If you can just shoot me a quick email, Candace@myavana.com. I'll put it in the chat, and then I'll add you to our email list so you can be part of our future campaigns. And one thing I also want to touch on, I believe that Connie mentioned it, is mental health, right? So mental health is a huge challenge for entrepreneurs, and especially Black entrepreneurs on this journey. I personally, I think 3 months in, I took a 1 month sabbatical because I was depressed, exhausted, and I needed a break. And I really got recharged to help me approach business building the right way without burning out. And so I actually wrote about this experience in my book. It's designed to help entrepreneurs endure the entrepreneurial journey. And so if you go to my website, CandaceVictoria.com, you can learn more. And thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel, because for us, the support keeps us going. So I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you all for joining today.
Thank you, Candace. Jamelle?
Yep, you can reach us at info@gryppers.com, and whether that's being a customer, and that's info@Gryppers, GRYPPERS, not an I, it's a Y. And that we can funnel different inquiries through that, and if you're looking to invest, you get connected directly to me. But we're working with a couple big brands and organizations that can really take us global, and so we're really excited about that and those opportunities. But again, customers, resources, extensive networks, and obviously capital can help us accelerate what we're doing and change where we're trying to go. But we're trying to create products that support and enhance humanity. And so we start with one product, and we have a pipeline of products that we'd love to get to the world and the consumer in general, because it's all about the consumer and the end user.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jamelle. Connie, Sandy, Charlene, I see you, but I want to give them each at least a minute to talk about what they're working on and amazing work that they're doing. Can we do that? Thank you.
I'll just quickly say, if you are a Black entrepreneur and would like to add to our study in regards to the trust barrier, you could reach out and contact us at aecevans@aeoworks.org. We are looking to field our next survey with over 1,000 Black entrepreneurs. And so if you'd like to share in this study about trust and helping us understand how do we break through this barrier, how it's manifesting and affecting the decisions you make with your business. Feel free to give me an email or a shout out, and we look forward to working with you. Congratulations again to these two amazing entrepreneurs. It's so exciting to hear your stories. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Connie. Sandy.
Wonderful to hear these stories from Jamelle and Candace, and to share in the insights that Connie has provided, particularly about the psychology of the process of investment and how that intersects with race. I just would urge venture capitalists to consider putting their own house in order with respect to the types of investment decisions that they make, changing it in such a way that they really do recognize the talent that's present among Black entrepreneurs. And then I would also encourage everyone to think about the central issue from my perspective, which is the prior generation of wealth across generations that is racially unequal and racially uneven. And that's what's motivated my work on the necessity for a national program of reparations on behalf of Black Americans.
I want to thank you all, Sandy, Connie, for building a foundation on which we're all building. Candace and Jamelle for building on that foundation and building the next foundations on which entrepreneurs after you will come. So huge thanks to Fuqua, Duke, and everyone present here today. I'll turn over to Charlene to close us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you for moderating such an insightful and informative panel for all of us. The entrepreneurs, Candace and Jamelle, thank you for sharing your stories and your experiences. The scholars, Connie and Sandy, thank you for providing institutional and infrastructural insights. I will say that were very helpful and informative. We really appreciate your time. Thank you to all the participants for being here. We hope you'll join us tomorrow for day 2, Equity by Design, which will focus on strategies for creating equitable investment ecosystems and identifying opportunities among entrepreneurs past, over, and current investment approaches, which we touched on a little bit today. So thank you again. Check the chat for the contact information and additional resources that our panelists have mentioned. We really appreciate you all sharing your time and expertise. Take care, everyone.